Those of you who've upgraded to the new iPhone 17 probably feels like you have made a massive leap, and honestly, you have. But here's the funny thing, that 6-year-old iPhone 11 is still running the same software as your 17. Think about it. Well, I wanted to see for myself just how usable is this phone in 2025. Because if it were truly that outdated, why would Apple still support it with iOS 26? Clearly, Apple thinks it's still got enough muscle under the hood. And to be fair, I kind of agree. And here's what surprised me. I expected lag, didn't get any. It's years old now, sure. The bezels look chunkier than ever and the design screams 2019. But it still doesn't feel like an imposter. The build quality still feels solid, and the hardware inside, that A13 Bionic, can still hold its own with most of today's app demands. So I have been using it again for a while, gaming, streaming, doom scrolling through social media, testing the camera and battery life, just to see how it holds up. While the battery has definitely aged, which is expected by now, almost everything else surprised me in ways I didn't expect. Now this is where I thought time would finally catch up. The camera. When I opened the camera, I didn't see anything flashy, but the photos that come out of this lens are still great. More than enough for social media and everyday stuff. Now, if you view them on a laptop or a bigger display, you'll start noticing that over-sharpening and that artificial texture here and there, but honestly, it's a 2019 phone. You can't really complain about not having a 200 megapixel sensor. Overall, it still looks very iPhone. Natural colors, solid HDR, and consistent results. And those lens transitions in the viewfinder, still smooth. Smoother than even some of the latest Android phones I've tested. That's genuinely impressive. You can zoom up to 5x, though of course, with that 12 megapixel sensor, digital zoom has its limits. And with the new camera app layout in iOS 26, everything feels minimal, clean. Everything's tucked away but instantly accessible when you need it. I actually like that a lot. Photos are still decent like I said, but what about videos? Both the main and ultra-wide cameras are 12 megapixel sensors. The main has an f1.8 aperture and the ultra-wide is f2.4. If you're starting YouTube or vlogging in 2025, this might still be enough to get you going. And that's crazy. That 13mm ultra-wide looks almost like a GoPro. The colors and dynamic range are ridiculously good for a phone this old. And the stabilization still holds up really well. When you switch to the main camera, the HDR remains consistent and walking shots stay smooth, which honestly surprised me. The video quality is just solid. It shows how good Apple's image processing was even back then. Now if you're thinking, it can't be that good, you're kinda right. When I watched the footage on my laptop, the flaws started showing. Over-sharpened details, fake skin textures and all that. But then again, on your phone screen, you won't even notice it. And that's why it's still great for social media use. Portrait mode is also decent. Both the rear and selfie cameras handle background separation quite nicely. Sure, it's not as clean as the new iPhones, it still struggles with hair edges and fine details, but it lights faces beautifully, and the overall result is pleasing. The ultra-wide lens does fall short in dynamic range, especially in tricky lighting where the sky gets blown out, but in normal daylight, it performs well, balancing colors, highlights, and shadows as best as that 12 megapixels f2.4 sensor can. The main camera's focus is still surprisingly good. You can shoot really tiny objects, flowers, textures, even moving subjects. White balance can drift a bit and highlights sometimes blow out. That's when it reminds you it's an iPhone 11. But for the most part, it still delivers clean, sharp results. Oh, and if you're like me and forget to clean your lens once in a while, you'll get that dreamy halation effect straight out of the camera. Almost looks cinematic by accident. The front camera also performs nicely. Regular selfies and portrait selfies both look sharp, well balanced, and just easy on the eyes. As soon as lighting dips though, you'll start noticing noise and some softness. The image begins to break down into patches. You can shoot in 4K, whether it's 24, 25, 30 or even 60 frames per second. And it still looks clean. The front camera, same deal. You get 4K at up to 60 FPS or 1080p at 120 FPS. Alright, let's talk display. Or should I say, the one part that reminds you this thing's from another era. The display on this phone, yeah, it's got that very chunky borders and that big notch you probably forgot about. It's a liquid retina IPS LCD, rated for around 625 nits of brightness. And with these numbers, it's bright enough for indoors, but step outside and you are basically squinting for your life. This isn't the kind of display that will impress you for brightness, but when it comes to color and clarity, it's actually nice. It's sharp enough that you won't notice any invisible pixels, and the colors looks balanced and natural. Still, compared to newer, mid-range or even budget phones, it's starting to show its age. Being an IPS panel, you don't get those deep blacks, and from certain angles, you'll see that familiar grayish tint. but for everyday use, scrolling, videos, social media, I'd still call it a good display. And remember, this thing only has 4 gigs of RAM. 4. Yet it's still smoother than some new mid-range Androids. It runs on Apple's A13 Bionic chip, built on the 7nm process, and that's what keeps it fast and responsive even now. Apps open quickly, animations stay smooth, and switching between heavy apps doesn't make it suffer. I played games on it too, and while it doesn't hit the highest graphic settings, the experience was surprisingly stable. No dropped frames, no major overheating. The only time it got warm was while shooting photos and videos outside, which is kind of expected for this age of iPhone. Now about the battery. On my unit, it's fine, just decent. Battery health plays a big role here, obviously, but I'm getting around 3 to 4 hours of screen on time on iOS 26, which is basically the same as before. I've seen people complain that this update wrecked their battery life, but in my case, it's been stable. Maybe a few hiccups, nothing major. Charging though is the test of patience, especially if you're coming from Android. It charges up to 50% in about 25 minutes with the Lightning 2.0 cable, which isn't bad, but still it's not winning any speed awards. On the bright side, since my battery isn't at full health anymore, it feels like it charges faster. As I mentioned in my previous videos, iOS 26 has done a great deal in terms of how the phone looks and feels. That liquid glass effect gives everything a depth and liveliness that actually makes this old iPhone feels modern again. It's still running on a 6-year-old design, but visually, the new interface helps it blends in with the newer lineup surprisingly well. Now speaking of design, the hand feel. The moment I picked this phone up again, it felt familiar, comfortable. Part of that is the size, and part of it is those soft, rounded corners and curved edges that we don't really get anymore on newer iPhones. The back glass is a bit slippery, yeah, but if you're someone who uses your phone without a case, that glossy surface actually feels nice in the hand, just not when it's covered in smudges, and it will be. Apple doesn't specify which Corning glass this is, but they do call it scratch resistant. Funny enough, right after filming this video, I noticed some scratches on mine. Not sure how that happened, but it did. The iPhone 11 weighs 194 grams and has IP68 water and dust resistance, so it's not fragile by any means. One thing we always appreciate about older iPhones is the mute switch. Yeah, it's here. You'll miss the fingerprint sensor if you're coming from Android, but Face ID here, the 3rd generation, is still quick, reliable, and even works when your fingers are wet. Yeah, speakers are fine too. They are not as bass heavy as newer iPhones, not booming, but clear, crisp, and balanced. The haptic feedback is still one of the best in the game. Apple really nailed the mechanical feel. Every tap still feels premium. So in the end, I would say iPhone 11 after all those years is still very usable. It runs the latest iOS 26 smoothly, which means all your modern apps, games, and services still works perfectly. The hardware is still capable, and day-to-day use doesn't feel like a compromise. Sure, its software support will likely end next year, but even then, this thing can easily keep you going for another year or two without issues. I'm Mubashir, you're watching Honest Tech. If you'd like to see me again on your homepage, please subscribe.